Hello, and welcome to my cellar one more time. I'm going to indulge myself a little on this first comment that I'm going to read because this is why I keep doing it. Sir, I started the hobby in 74 and 75 as I evolved in it and stayed in the hobby all the way up until today. You, sir, have been a hero of the hobby to me, and I want to thank you for all you've done. Love you, and blessings to you and yours. Yeah, that's why I do it. I just, those kind of comments just, I don't want to say they stoke my ego, but they sure feed my soul. Compliments to Mr. Wampler on the opening. Tim, thanks for sharing your knowledge and experience. I wait until Monday morning to start my work week the best way possible. All the best to you. Well, I'm touched. If you use me to start your week. I've seen a couple of rants from a kind of young YouTuber, aspiring game designer, about how Chainmail was critical to playing real D&D. He got oddly triggered. It was a weird rant when I told him that, although I own Chainmail, we never used the Chainmail combat rules for combat in D&D in the late 70s. Admittedly, I was very young and my group was small. However, I did go to a few small cons at Marshall University in South Charleston, West Virginia. I honestly don't recall seeing anyone actually playing with miniatures, nor anyone using the chainmail combat rules in lieu of the other combat rules in D&D. We actually viewed miniatures in D&D, mentioning the chainmail rules, as just a marketing attempt. In your perception, how common was theater of the mind in the early D&D, and how common was chainmail rules for combat? Okay, this is an interesting comment and I got to come up with an interesting question. He's wrong. You didn't need chainmail. D&D came from chainmail. It arose out of chainmail. Now, that's not to say that if some people early in the game's lifespan had an occasion to have a couple of big groups of soldiers meet, that they might certainly set aside and play chainmail in that encounter. Was it necessary? Absolutely not. Actually, it was rather primitive when you look at it, because you had rank and file, you had heroes, and you had superheroes. Rank and file took one hit, heroes took 2 hits to kill, and superheroes 3 hits to kill. And it was from that tiered ranking system that a lot of D&D sprang. They were levels, if you will, the very first levels. But was it necessary? Absolutely not. I don't believe I ever used it. I don't believe I saw anyone at TSR use it, except in the aforementioned case where we were going to have a big regional dust-up. And then, of course, we reverted because there weren't any rules up to that point, because Swords and Spells hadn't been done yet. And to be honest, I'm not a big fan of Swords and Spells. There were better rules out there at the time, but that's what TSR wanted to do. So it's not critical at all to playing real D&D, whatever the hell real D&D is. I don't even know what real D&D is. Real D&D is the one you like to play and that your group likes to play with you. That's real D&D. Props alone for the intro. Thank Jim for that. It was a dandy, wasn't it? Okay, hello, and thanks again for responding to my previous question about finding players for first edition. I like the soft goading challenge idea. I'll work on that. My new question is, if you were interested in trying to create the nostalgia and fond memories of playing through the very early modules for basic and first edition AD&D, which 2 or 3 would you choose and why? I'd love to find a few players that I can entice to play B1 in Search of the Unknown. I truly love that model and wish I could bottle up the pleasure I got from playing it playing through it as a young man and take a new sip every now and then. Of course, I love the Keep on the Borderland, the Village of Hamlet, and others. But they have so much attention on the internet that I don't think anyone can say they haven't been spoiled. I still have my original Dragon magazine with Doomkeep and dream of having a group that gelled enough over time to make it to that level too. All right, which ones would I choose? Well, provided it wasn't a group of newbies, I'd absolutely go for the G series, the Giants, because that's an epic 3-part adventure that you may well find yourself resting up for months of game time between one level and the next, just from the beating you might have taken. For when it came to a giant one, I'm not even going to mention a TSR product. I'm going to mention the City State of the Invincible Overlord. And if you want to introduce a group to playing in a town, that's the way to go. It's all there laid out for you. Really, beyond those two suggestions, I don't have any. From the early ones, I'd say, the Giants. Those were our first, but they were also different in that there was a measurable metric in there that we used running tournaments. DMs clever enough to figure it out can do the same thing for measuring success or failure of a given endeavor. It's there. And tell you something. Give them big characters. Give them 7, 8, 9s. I'm talking about OD&D here, or even first edition. First edition, add 2. Give them 7, 8, 9th level players, and set them loose on the Giants, and they'll find out what life-threatening really means. Several times, more than likely. I'm sorry to do this to you, but what is the big bag of jars with toxic green contents in the background right screen to my left? Well, that's my bag. I carry a bag. My sister made those bags. She's quite the quilter. And she made a couple of bags with me with pot leaves on them. She knows I'm an old pothead. And that's what I carry my junk around with, lighter, pipe, film can, whatever. So yeah, that's what it is. You knew what it was. You're just being a jerk. But it's okay. Hello, Mr. Cask. Your Brazilian fan here once more. The podcast, When We Were Wizards, is a more professional style audio documentary. Yeah, I know I'm not real professional, am I? I'm just fun. Many people from the early TSA era were interviewed, and the hosts have put together a narrative that spans from the pre-D&D days to the famous ambush at Sheridan Springs. Your name comes up several times naturally, and I'm very curious to hear what you, as an eyewitness to history, there's a heavy mantle on my shoulders, could add to the already fascinating content presented in the series. It's a self-contained production of 14 episodes, not an ongoing show. Well, I don't think I'll be watching 14. I mean, come on. I have better things. I value other things higher than watching a podcast that has 14 episodes. Please take time to listen and share your thoughts. Well, if I had the time, I might. If there's a particular one or two that you want to recommend, I'm not going to watch all 14. I simply don't have the time, and to be honest, not much inclination. And, of course, the next one goes on and says, what episodes was I mentioned in? And another comment says, thanks for mentioning that podcast. I've been looking for exactly that sort of audio history for a while. Well, speaking of interviews, I finally got together with the couple from Italy who have a quite serious book of work. They've done a lot of very good quality interviews before, and they had I spent about an hour and a half with him. They'd given me a prepared list of what he was thinking about, talking about, and I had told him at the time, I don't care, I don't need that. Thanks for sending it, but I don't really need it. And so we'd been trying to hook up for weeks, and finally got it together, and the first thing was, okay, I got this list. Why don't I just answer them as we go? And so I did, and I went down and I answered them and there were various things about the history of the game and the impact that it had. And I don't believe there's any question I haven't been answered or had to address before. But it was quite refreshing to sit down with a pair of players, or I'm not even sure if they play, but they're certainly interested parties from another country and get a different viewpoint. So I found it quite enjoyable, and I'm glad we finally were able to hook up and get together on it. Next, well, reviewing the chainmail rules on another podcast, I noticed that the purple worm was described as a flightless dragon, as in worm with a Y, and with a stinger and no breath weapon. Do you know when and why it was turned to a pastiche of a dune sandworm? Well, I'm not sure, but I'm not exactly which came first, the dune or the purple worm. The purple worm in chainmail, a monster, was just something that took a lot more hits and had a special ability of some sort. And to why it was turned into the dune sandworm, which I don't really think it is. I've certainly never used it that way. And it was probably Gary. Might have been Rob. Slight possibility it was Dave. But now, having sat in on those brainstorming sessions back in the day, I can't really give you an honest an answer that I can stand behind and say, this is how it happened. But I can tell you that's probably how it happened. And some of the things that Gary created in Greyhawk were along the lines of cleanup crew. Purple worms and gelatinous cubes cleaned up the mayhem and the madness after the adventures had gone through. Gary's Greyhawk had various wings, if you will, dungeons. And while for a while it might be the orc wing, when the orcs are cleaned out, something else moves in. And it's the same dungeon. Of course, they've made little minor changes, so you don't know everything that you're going to see. And there's a whole set of new characters to deal with in there. Beyond that, I don't know. Woo! The Boule made it into the quarterfinals of the Dungeons and Death Battles CR5 season on the Dungeon Boy channel. Was down to 2 hit points but pulled out the win. We're rooting for it to win the season. We shall see. Well, I don't know. I don't know what the Dragon Boy channel is. 2 things to remember. I'm on Facebook and I'm on YouTube. I don't do TikTok. I don't do any of the chat channels or any of that crap. I just don't care for the media that much and don't need another time sink. And, that, in my opinion, that's what, these chat and stuff. I can't remember the name of the one. But I don't subscribe to them. People send me a link to one of them, and I can't. I won't download them because I'm not going to put in the rest of it. Okay. What are my thoughts on weapon speed? Well, I think a lot of it's nitpicky. I don't see the necessity to assign a speed rating to every weapon. Common sense should rule here. Now, if a guy my size, even with 20 years ago musculature, picked up a big, damn heavy, massive hammer, it's going to be slow because it's going to take everything I got just to wield the thing. However, you get a guy that's 17, 18 up to 25 or even higher, whew, it's going to be a lot faster because they got a lot more muscle going behind it. So I never liked assigned weapon speeds. I believe that it should be adjusted on the fly, so to speak. I talked about initiative. If the archer or the slinger, whatever your range weapon wielder is, has a stone in the pocket, has an arrow up between his fingers, is waiting to be knocked and pulled, that's fine. If they don't have that, you got to fish out the stone, got to get the arrow out of that. Well, then I'm going to slow them down. I'm going to give them 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 counts on the initiative die. It's the same way I work for things that shoot twice. Well, if they didn't shoot till the 5th or 6th round of initiative and they shoot twice, well, then I'm going to give them a shot on the first round of the next one. I try to interweave everything so that it's relatively seamless. And I think initiative is much more important than just about anything else, particularly weapon speed. Where does weapon, what exactly what's the justification for applying weapon speed to 4 different kinds of swords that are all essentially long swords? What's the point? It's a long sword. Okay? I don't make long swords go slower necessarily, but again, it's situational. If you're fighting some smallish dude with an amazingly high agility and quickness, okay, you can apply some of that. And certainly, if they're fast enough, you're going to die the death of 100 cuts, by the time you're done swinging for the 3rd time. So, I don't agree with weapon speed except as another thing to put in the equation as who's going when. Because I don't, you have a weapon that has a high rate of speed wielded by somebody who doesn't, some who's slow and with a low agility, a low strength, a low constitution, any of those or all of them. Just because the weapon's rated fast doesn't mean it's going to be wielded fast. If you're fighting a trained Asian warrior who's good with nunchucks, well, okay, I guess you better take speed into account here, because they're going to and bop you over the head before you can blink. But that's a function of the training more than it is a function of the weapon itself. Someone in my town is trying to get a board game and tabletop role-playing convention going. It looks not to have much traction and is in a month. What kind of suggestions would you have to help get something like this up and running? I'd love to help them out with more than just running a game, so any advice would be appreciated. Also, it is WinonaCon in southeast Minnesota, in case others here might be interested. Okay. Yeah, I've helped a few cons get going over the years. I've just had conversations with some people across the river in Kentucky about their upcoming con in April and what I'd be willing to do. and please don't think this is ego, the best, sharpest, quickest thing you can do is get somebody with a name to come to your con. They will draw people. Get several people. Make sure you're playing the more interesting games that are currently in vogue. Today with the internet and Facebook and TikTok and all this other stuff, the potential for being able to advertise for free is astonishing. I mean, my God, what we could have done back in the day if we'd had the internet. Gen Con would have been 30,000 people back when it was 6. Because the amplification of the internet today and social media is such that you have a reasonable expectation of ramping up. Go talk to your local newspaper. Go talk to your local television or radio station. Find somebody on the staff of one of those who, if they aren't a gamer, at least they know what the hell you're talking about, and get them interested. An article a week or two in advance, well, 2 weeks in advance is just wonderful. A week might help, but not as much as 2 weeks will, because now you give people time to see if they can shift their schedules around and do this thing. There's lots of free publicity out there. The internet and your local paper and your local radio stations being primary amongst them. Word of mouth is good, but really it's not very much at driving numbers. Feature games that are currently hot. If that means 5e, then, run 5e. If you decide to run most of your events as 5e, make a point to have some events that are not 5e. Old school, first edition, whatever. Don't just look at D&D. There's other good role-playing games out there. But if it's a month away, without a coordinated campaign online, you're not going to do it. Do you have a local game store? Do you have a local store that sells games? Ask them to put up a flyer. If they hesitate, point out the fact that if you make new converts that weekend, where are they going to go to buy their games? To you. All right? So get some vendors involved in it, or at least cooperating with you, so that when they see the sign in the local hobby shop or the local game store, or more than one local store, that immediately lends credence to it. Just repetition will lend credence to it. Shouldn't, by all rights, but it does. And again, I say, use a name to draw. Find somebody who's got a hot new system, or who has an established career and a CV that's, impressive, and bring them in. I reached out to the Covington people when I saw it. That's the Connington across the river. I reached out when I saw something on Facebook and said, hey, let's talk. And we did. And so the only game I volunteered to do is if they decide to do a charity game where, the people have to shell out the bucks for the positions at the table or pay a steep entry fee, auction, whatever, then I would certainly do that because, again, getting a charity involved is a big boost. Have an auction that benefits a local feel-good charity. And they will help you promote it because they stand to gain from it also. That's all I can give you right offhand. I don't know your media market or your gaming your gaming saturation. But if in general, that's what I would recommend. And if you live in southeast Minnesota, check it out in Winona. Good day, Tim. I've been looking at playing early editions of D&D. I got my hands on a PDF of the Beckmeat Basic Rules. I'm thinking of going that route, but also wanting to look at AD&D. What are your thoughts on the two systems? I can foresee a time where I might try to meld the two into another Frankenstein-like monster. Let's see, read more. P.S. To follow up on my 5-year-old, I had a day off again with him as he recovered from some surgery and adenoid removal, and I asked if he wanted to play. He said, no, we have to wait for Mom. I laughed and told my wife, and she was mortified. I said, hey, it could be worse. He only wants to make you play D&D. He could have been angling for a dog. There's always something worse. I'm not a fan of the Beckme rules. Basic, expert, master, immortal. It was just in my opinion, it was another attempt by TSR to sell some more books and to enable a framework that allows you to challenge the very pantheons of the gods themselves. Well, I may be bragging, but I've never had to involve a god in any great campaign or game I've ever run. Don't need him. I can give you plenty of stuff here on Earth that don't involve getting into pagan beliefs or some sort of twisted Judeo-Christian ethic thing. I just stay the hell away from them. Don't like them, don't need them, don't do them. All right, now I saved the best one for last. What's your take on the amount of rules in advanced D&D? Do you personally like a game that has more rules spelled out? Or do you like playing a game where the DM makes a lot of the rulings at the table depending upon the situation? Yes! That's my thing. When you get right down to it, DMs are not much different from the shaman who used to throw a sheep's shoulder into the fire until it developed cracks, pulled it out, and read the future. We're not much different than when they made dice, knuckle bones, out of sheep's knuckle bones. And I have some here, and they work. They're not going to be perfect. They're not going to pass the precision dice test, but they worked for them, the people that used them. I'm a situational player. Everything we ever published that I was involved with always had a disclaimer in the front saying, if you don't like the rule, change it. That's all you can say. Hey, if you don't like it, change it. These aren't written in stone. Nobody came down and with their finger wrote in a hazy golden flame on the side of a cliff these rules. So yeah, I prefer rules less. I prefer latitude to take it where I think both I and the group want it to go. I would never do it just to take it where I want it to go, with the rare exception of, oh my God, these guys are so far off the trail. I gotta push them back on and remind them why they started this campaign. That doesn't happen often, but it can. It can. Okay, now this gets interesting. What led Gary Gygax to make advanced D&D with so many rules spelled out? Was he doing it because a lot of people wrote in asking him to adjudicate situations? Nah. From their games, was he personally into having more rules written down? No, absolutely not. I've heard that many kids in the 80s started playing basic with its rules light, but then they left it and picked up advanced, thinking, hey, AD&D is what the cool older play. Basic D&D is for babies. What's my take on that? Well, I tell you what, I could sit down with a blue box and run you through an adventure. You'd have just as much fun, I think. My ego flashing through here. I think I can run you through just. You see, I don't understand. I absolutely do not understand the proliferation of stupid, silly, unnecessary, redundant monsters. I can run you in a campaign for 3 years and never use anything that wasn't in the monster list in the first book. I don't need a Tarask. I don't need Tiamat. Okay? Mainly because I don't play campaigns at that high level. I'll be honest here. I don't. But I don't need it. I can mess your party up with a handful of hobgoblins. No problem. Basic is not for babies. Now, why did Gary do it? Well, the big ugly secret is money. Gary and Brian cooked up this harebrained scheme that if they did another version of D&D, called it Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and made it a little different, they could cut Arneson out of the profits, out of the royalties. They were wrong. Dave took them to court, and they either had the world's dumbest lawyer or they were brain dead that day in court because they lost. Money. They thought they could make a product that they didn't have to give Arneson a royalty on. I don't care what. Well, there's hardly anybody else there that was there that when I was at that time. So I'm not worried about being refuted. Somebody might interpret it differently, but that's not what it was. I sat in on the meetings. I helped create AD&D with Gary. I helped basic, advanced, and then I washed my hands of the game division and solely turned my efforts to periodicals. But that's why they did it. Money. Money. Feuding. Now, if my own opinion had been asked in that court, I'd have said, no, I didn't think he had much coming at all, if any, because a lot of what had been accredited to him, he didn't write anyway. Gary wrote it. I'm not saying that Dave didn't have the ideas. Dave was a great idea guy. He just couldn't explain it. And he couldn't put it down to paper so somebody else could understand it. He had these ideas of this game. And Gary, being Gary, said, oh, I like that. And bang, 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 he knocked out the books. Who did most of the work? Gary, 70% at least. Is that how royalties work? Not if you don't make that arrangement up front. When you're just being Mr. Nice Guy, oh, sure, you can have the same royalties I got, even though Gary had done 3 times the amount of work. He still did it because he was a nice guy. And he thought, yeah, sure, why not? Bad mistake. Got taken to court, lost, paid the lawyer's fees and the settlement. And I sat back in Lake Geneva while they were up there getting their asses handed to them in court and just laughed up my sleeve. Because I wasn't even asked to be part of the testimony. And as Dave's editor, I could have testified to just how little he did do. But Gary and Brian didn't want me involved. And much to their chagrin, they lost. Now, I'm not saying that I would have turned the tide. I might have. Or I might have just have mitigated some of the damages. But they got greedy, tried to cut out Dave. Dave sued and won. End of story. And And speaking of end of story, I think that's the last comment I have. So, let's see, what's coming up? Fall. No cons that I'm aware of, that I'm involved with. So, I just say, support your local game store. It's better to spend $5 more at home than it is to get $5 off and buy it through the mail, especially if you're going to pay the shipping. You didn't save a thing. And your local game store needs it. Because if we don't support our local game stores, we no longer have local game stores. And that would be tragedy indeed. Dodata Govi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Called it Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.